I've been getting this question very often. It goes like this. I want to start collecting ancient coins, but I don't want to make a huge investment at the very beginning. Basically, people want a good-looking coin for a reasonable price, which can serve as a good first coin, a stepping stone into ancient coin collecting. Yeah, I get it, and since the whole issue of pricing can look very complicated at the very beginning, after all, how should we price an object that is around 2000 years old, it can get very confusing very fast. Now, of course, I'm going to help you out on that, but first, a word of advice. Just because something is the most affordable for its niche, it doesn't mean you need to collect it. I understand we feel a strong urge of, getting your first coin as soon as possible so you can have something to get started, but from experience, I found that it's best to initially do some sort of introspection as to why you are collecting ancient coins in the very first place, and what kinds of coins you could see yourself collecting for the next 10 years or so. Any reason is valid. You like them purely based on aesthetics, you like them for historical context, you see them as maybe a future asset for investment. All of these are perfectly fine. It's just that if you buy something simply for the fact it is good value for money, you will most likely see yourself discouraged to continue collecting sooner or later. This hobby is all about feeling connected with your collection, and this is a slow hobby that rewards those who are patient and research a lot. So it's very important to keep that flame alive inside of you, and this mostly comes from collecting things that really speak to you. That warm feeling of getting something that is really good value for money, that quickly goes away. And if it turns out that what you really want ends up being within a more expensive niche and it doesn't fit in your budget for very frequent purchases, I would rather come up with some kind of compromise. Either accept a coin in slightly worse grade, but that still calls your attention, or maybe just reduce the number of purchases each year and focus your capital on less coins. Just do yourself a favor and only acquire coins that you really enjoy. So with that out of the way, we're here to look at budget ancient coins. So let's throw in some reference numbers. What do we mean by budget? Inflation affects the price of ancients just as much as it does with other goods and other collectibles. So for this video, I'm setting a baseline between 25 and 100 euros for a coin in at least the very fine grade. So a good looking coin, not uncirculated, but still visually appealing, and something that is not particularly rare or very sought after in its little sub-niche. What I mean by this is, even in affordable niches, there will be coins with some special, some special commemorative design or something made with an exceptionally nice die in regards to its style that sets it apart from the rest of its series, and as a result, something that makes a certain coin an outlier in regards to price. What we're looking at here are just typical examples. And of course, keep this in mind if you're watching this in the future, that the list I'm using takes into account the current retail environment in 2026. If you want to learn how to do price research by yourself, there's a video in the beginners playlist that teaches you how to do it, but for the sake of brevity here, I'm giving you the digested information based on my personal experience navigating the market. I've seen my fair share of dealers who practice predatory pricing simply based on the fact people don't know what these are supposed to cost. Fortunately, these guys constitute a minority of the market, but I'm a bit tired of seeing beginners paying hundreds of euros or dollars for coins that are worth, half or even less of that asking price. So, not on my watch. And by the way, if you have a recommendation, a type of ancient coin you think it's good value for money, share it with your fellow collectors. Let us know in the comment section below which niche you think is still affordable and why you enjoy these types of coins. I love reading your comments. Alright, let's have a look at some pretty coins. And we start with Roman coinage, because, well, it tends to be the most popular niche in ancient numismatics. So we'll start with these. And fortunately, we are spoiled for choice. The Romans were a very monetized people. So let's begin with the coins from the 3rd century AD. I'm using the skewed little denarius of Emperor Severus Alexander, who reigned between 222 and 235 as an example. This was a time of political instability, of emperors rising and falling in quick succession, and the whole political situation generated a huge economic downturn and a feeling of uncertainty amongst the Roman people. In that climate, hoarding was a normal reaction, stashing money away in case violence broke out or something happened. And of course, and this phenomena happened on a very large scale based on how large the treasures dated from this time period are and how often they show up. Apart from the hoarding behavior, we also need to add in the vast number of coins that were made in this period. And you end up in a position more favorable for the collector because 3rd century coins survive in very high numbers, in fairly good condition because they didn't circulate a whole lot. And they were still made in high quality, realistic style. I mean, the portrait here looks very appealing, and if you compare it against a marble bust of this emperor, you will realize the portraiture is still very lifelike. And this applies for most silver coins spanning the time of the Severan dynasty and the 3rd century at large. So throughout the 3rd century, there was what was called the military anarchy at the early to mid stages of the crisis of the 3rd century. And most of the coins of this time can be found for under 100 euros in pretty decent shape. Here's another example. We have an Antoninianus, so a double denarius, of Philip the Arab, a relatively short-lived emperor, but he issued an outrageous number of coins, and once again, hoarding was very significant during his reign, so his coins end up being very common and affordable. There are a few exceptions during this century in regards to its affordability. It's important to make this caveat. There are certain special issues, certain denominations that are expensive. Some of the very short-lived emperors from the century, those who reigned for a few months, these can get a bit more expensive as well, but I think the rule still applies. It's a very affordable niche, especially for silver coinage. And as we move into the late 3rd century, with the hyperinflationary spiral that happened under Emperor Gallienus and all of the emperors that follow him, it's more of the same thing. Their coins are also widely available, although maybe these coins might not be for everyone's taste. The debasement from that time means these coins generally, they don't have barely any silver in them. They look more like copper, like this piece made under Aurelian around 275, although this one fortunately has a very nice silvering layer to improve its appearance on top of its surfaces. And I mean, there's also the problem that by that time, coins also lose this personalized portraiture they used to have. We don't have a realistic depiction of the emperor anymore. It's more of a schematic image, but still perfectly charming little coins and very affordable for anyone. And we keep moving on, and we go to an even more affordable type of Roman coin, what is called the late Roman coinage. This is more of an umbrella term in reality. This was a time period that saw a sequence of different monetary systems rolled out across the 4th and 5th centuries. Now, these are the centuries of true hyperinflation, much worse than the 3rd century. Now, what was a terrible time for the Romans, once again meant a great time for us collectors, because since all of these inflationary reforms, one after the other, demanded a whole mountain of new coins with new face values, they had to be minted. So, of course, the idea behind it was to continually issue new emissions to keep the army paid and the imperial court functioning at a time of decreasing tax revenue due to the collapsing Roman economy. And within this category of late Roman coins, you will encounter the term late Roman bronzes being thrown around. That's where this mountain of coins was concentrated in. The small denominations, made either of bronze, without any intrinsic value, or very low-grade billion, generally 5% silver or below. Most have like a pitiful 2%, 1% silver in them. The late Roman bronzes series begins with Diocletian's monetary reforms during his tetrarchy. His most common coins, the big numi or numus in singular, containing 5% silver, are some of the largest coins of this entire series, and they're still very affordable, especially considering the size and weight of the coins. For our top price, 100 euros, actually substantially less, you can get a very good looking uncirculated example. Just to illustrate this niche with another coin, let's go to the Constantinian dynasty, and this time period also offers a lot of variety. Although, as you can see from this piece of Constantine the Great, the size of the bronzes decreases significantly, but it's still a very easy niche to collect. There are plenty of online resources to study it, and you can assemble a collection featuring all members of the dynasty with many different portraits and reverses, different types issued at different mints. It's all very affordable, even in high grade. The reason these coins are so common today is the same as with the previous coins. Very high minting numbers, and hoarding continued to be a very common phenomenon at that time. On the current numismatic market, the demand for such coins generally isn't high enough to push the prices up, even if there's a number of very dedicated collectors. It's just that the supply is very substantial. It's also important to add the caveat that I'm not talking about all late Roman coins. This applies mostly to these smaller denominations, those made out of billion or pure bronze. Late Roman silver is scarcer. Even the most common pieces are firmly above our proposed budget for this video, and of course gold sits in its own price universe. Still, the bronze series offers great variety. Maybe artistically, if you enjoy realism, these aren't the most exciting coins in the Roman Imperial universe. They continue on with the more abstract style of portraits, but even like this, they have their own unique charm. There were perfectly reasonable historical reasons as to why these coins look the way they do. It isn't just a matter of civilizational decline, and of course the reverses, given that there were so many coins made, the reverses are super diverse, and I think they're very fun to collect. Collecting these offers us an opportunity to get a glimpse of an even more obscure part of Roman history. Even more than the 3rd century, the late Empire is a really unique period of Western history that you should pay more attention to. Alright, we keep going on with our tour. We leave the Roman Imperial mints, that means those run directly by the Emperor, and we get into Roman provincial coins. These were coins issued under the special authorization of the Emperor, an authorization given to specific cities or entire provinces to issue their own local coins in order to facilitate trade. Think of them as municipal or provincial money made with the Emperor's blessing. In fact, we see that since the vast majority of these coins feature the portrait of the Emperor, they certainly had to count with his permission to mention his sovereignty in order to be allowed to circulate. And that's what makes this universe of coins very unique and very cool, frankly, as they have a very unique character. Each coin opens up multiple avenues for research, and it's like each coin, since they're so local in nature, it offers a unique avenue to go down a research rabbit hole and know who made the coin, what was the city like, what was the kinds of gods that the city venerated, anything you can think of. Most of the provincial issues are bronze. Some specific issues were made in silver or a copper-silver mix, particularly where trade was very intense. I mean, it was unusual for a province to be allowed to issue precious metal coins. It had to be either a special city, a big one, or very close to an important trade route for something like that to be allowed. After all, think about it, soldiers were paid with silver, so it's understandable that the emperor would not give the privilege of making silver coins that easily. A good example of a copper-silver mix is this Egyptian tetradrachma we see here, issued under Maximianus. It looks coppery to the eye, yet it does contain a little bit of silver in its alloy. It's just that this coin was made at a time of rampant inflation once again, another reason that makes it very common. And as you might have noticed, because of how different it looks compared to an imperial issue, they were very local in nature. Provincials aren't exactly easy to collect. These issues rarely match the official imperial standards, and many continue earlier Hellenistic weight systems that were in place long before the Romans even came and conquered the region. For me, the nicest thing about these coins is their uniqueness. The iconography is incredibly local in character. It shows stuff like the city in personified form, the actual personification of the city. You see regional deities, local structures, temples, rivers, river gods, trophies from civic games that were organized in a certain city, anything that could be used to symbolize where the coin was made. And the legends are often in Greek, which can be a hurdle if you're new to the hobby, or, as I would propose, maybe an invitation for you to learn how to read a coin if you enjoy researching. And yeah, styles range widely from rough, ugly-looking engraving made by maybe some local artisan to pieces of incredible beauty that match or even surpass anything done by an imperial mint. And all of that variety in types and mints and styles and denominations actually explains their lowly place in the market. Apart from very remarkable coins, which are a minuscule minority, most provincials are very cheap compared against imperial series. Actually, many collectors simply ignore provincial coins completely, which is a shame in my eyes. But hey, this leads to smaller demand. On the other hand, the supply side, once again, is very generous. There were hundreds of different cities that made local coins, so there's an abundance of types to choose. And as a result, prices stay relatively low for the majority of them. For you to overspend in provincials, you would probably have to be going after some special coin with a particularly beautiful die or a genuinely rare issue that some specialists would go after. Other than that, maybe for you to find some real competition at an auction, you would have to go to some of the most popular niches like coins of Alexandria, maybe silver issues from Syria or from Cappadocia. So yeah, if you want coins with character, local stories, and plenty of room for original research, this field is an excellent choice. You can build sets by cities, by different deities, by architectural types, governors, different time periods. It's probably one of the most flexible niches to come up with a set. So yeah, give them a try and go crazy. And if you think we were over with affordable Roman coins, you would be wrong. So, Rome fell in 476 AD, but to the east, the Romans carried on for another 1,000 years, and they continue with their tradition of striking coins. The Eastern Romans, or the Byzantines, you pick your name, they continue to be a highly urbanized people, and they kept using coinage extensively throughout their history, especially bronze coins. Now, you produce anything without stopping for 1,000 years, you are bound to have an abundance of that thing. And that's the case with Byzantine coins. If you are looking to add a few of their bronzes to your collection, you are once again spoiled for choice. Now, the Byzantines get a bit of a bad reputation, which I think is unfair. By carrying the name Romans on their backs, many collectors feel disappointed because the artistry on their coins isn't exactly the best. Although there are a few beautiful dies even on bronze issues, but Byzantine coinage ends up being the ugly duckling of the three main collecting niches of ancient coins, that is Roman, Greeks, and Byzantines, which I think it's unfair. It's such an interesting civilization to collect, but well, at least, once again, it reduces the demand for these coins and make them more affordable. Although, once again, a word of advice, if you decide to enter the rabbit hole of Byzantine coins, there are fairly rare and expensive coin issues, even in bronze. Let's remember this was a huge empire. It issued coins in many different territories, like Italy, up in the Crimean Peninsula, and in many of the areas of the original Western Roman Empire. So there are bronze issues from specific times and specific mints that are rare and can get expensive. And just like the Western Romans, the Eastern Romans also issued things like special commemorative issues, which can make a seemingly common coin quickly rise up in prices. But even with that, you are still entering a part of numismatics that is, in my opinion, still underappreciated. And I would say it's likely that these coins could see an increase in price in the future. But I don't collect for making a profit, so I do it because coins are cool. So yes, Certainly, Byzantine coins are part of Roman history, and you should consider them. And these are very gentle on your pocket, so get one or two of them at least and give Byzantines a try. Alright, 20 minutes in and we finally leave Rome. We pick up our magnifying glasses and we go back to ancient Greece, to classical Greece, to take a look at some of their silver fractions. In the classical period, there was a distrust of bronze, copper, or any metal that wasn't precious to be used as money. They didn't carry an intrinsic value in them, so they weren't meant to be used as money, according to the Greeks. So the solution was to make fractional money, well, fractional. Small denominations were simply smaller and smaller and smaller. And some fractions can get minuscule. As you can see here, they fit right at the tip of my finger, but they still have a considerable number of little details and intricacies on them. It makes me wonder if the Greeks had access to some sort of magnification device to enlarge the dice to be able to sculpt these tiny little things. Of course, the small size puts off some collectors, and their relative abundance means this is a nice niche to collect. Many different cities issue these fractions, and some are common and pretty affordable, particularly considering how expensive bigger classical Greek coins can get. So these tiny little guys here offer a nice alternative for those wanting to get into classical coinage without spending a lot of money. With that being said, that is another niche that has its caveats. There were a lot of small fractional pieces made, and there is a part of the market that can reach some pretty substantial prices. In the last couple of years, I've seen a few auctions dedicated to fractionals, and some coins went into the very respectable four figures. Given these were rare coins, some had historical significance, and these auctions were focused on coins with exceptionally beautiful dice for such tiny little things. So, but still, that means that for the more common types, or maybe for the more average looking dice, it is still a relatively affordable niche. I just had to warn you that in case you want to delve into this world and become a dedicated collector of fractionals in the future, get ready for some expensive coins. But still, I mean, it's a wonderful little niche to get into. The sheer variety is amazing. These are incredibly old coins, and there are lots of different denominations to choose. So, once again, lots of diversity and a fun little niche. And for our next type of affordable ancients, we are staying on fractional coins, but now we're getting into Hellenistic bronzes. These bronze fractions represent a shift in how the Greeks approached a small change, from the tiny silver fractions we've seen previously to slightly larger, more practical bronze pieces that were entirely fiduciary. The use of bronze on Greek coinage can be traced as far back as the mid-5th century BC in Sicily, but that was more of a localized, earlier phenomenon. The widespread use of fractions really begins in the mid to the late classical period. And as a side note, there are some earlier bronze pieces from the late classical period. They are also affordable, but personally, I find that the majority of the affordable and good-looking bronze coins come from the Hellenistic period. So, in the Hellenistic period, with Alexander the Great, the practice of issuing bronze coins becomes really, truly widespread. The reason to be behind these bronze is on one hand financial, of course. Issuing cities and kingdoms wanted to be able to issue more coins with less available silver, but also for the sense of practicality. These bronze fractions stand in for the lower rungs of the Greek silver standard. Generally, everything of the size of a drachma, let's keep in mind the drachma was roughly equivalent to a daily wage of a worker, so a substantial amount of money, anything of that size was probably made out of silver. Obols, the main fraction of the drachma, were mostly made in silver. There are some coins of this type issued in bronze, and any denomination smaller than the obol was almost always a bronze. Once again, we're talking about an enormous niche of Greek coinage, and they're known for their diversity. I mean, some carry regal portraits of kings and show plainly monarchical messages, but the majority of these bronzes were made in congruence with their nature as coins for local circulation. Therefore, they showed symbols of local identity, local gods, personifications of cities once again, some kind of civic symbol that speaks to the city that made the coin more than the king himself, even if there's almost always a lot of royal iconography on these as well. And because they were everyday money, they had to be made in huge numbers for a very long time. And the Hellenistic world at that time was gigantic. So imagine the output of coins across dozens of kingdoms, leagues, and cities over the course of centuries. The result is a very vast population of surviving coins. And for us, as I mentioned previously, the appeal is obvious. I mean, I love these little things. You get variety, you get real historical connection to a relatively well-recorded time of ancient Greek history. I still can't believe how the Hellenistic period doesn't get the same attention the Romans get. It's a fascinating time of Western history. But yeah, back to coins. They also look consistently great in this realistic yet gently idealized Hellenistic style for portraits. I find super harmonious. I just don't understand why the market's attention is so unbalanced, so focused towards silver. But hey, this leaves the bronzes comparatively affordable. So yeah, if you collect the Greek world, if you enjoy ancient Greece, if you enjoy the history of the Hellenistic kingdoms or Greek mythology, there are lots of different avenues you could go when assembling a set of fractional bronzes. And finally, we're leaving the Greco-Roman sphere and we're looking east. Let's first make a stop at the Sasanian Empire. Now, the Sasanians were one of the great Persian empires of antiquity. They were around between 224 AD, when their first king, Ardashir, took over from the Parthians, and would only fall quite a few centuries later, around 650 AD, when they fell to the forces of Islam in their first great wars of expansion. Now, the Sasanians profited greatly from the famous Silk Route, that commercial route that connected Europe to the Far East. The majority of the length of that route passed through Sasanian territory. They, of course, levied very heavy taxes on any trader who crossed their territory, and this led to them becoming enormously rich. The Sasanians had a series of different mints on their territories, and they issued an enormous quantity of coins. There were pieces issued in copper and gold, but the vast majority of the coins you find were silver drachma, such as this one, issued under Khusro II, probably one of the most prolific producers of coins from this nation. 4 grams of very high quality silver right here. Maybe the style of these coins isn't breathtaking, but as a store of value, as money, these were definitely very high quality coins. Now, these are not exactly the easiest coins to collect. Each Sasanian king issued coins with his own unique portrait. Particularly when looking at the crowns above the king's head, you can tell them apart. That at least helps you to distinguish one monarch from the other. But of course, unless you're willing to learn Middle Persian to be able to read these coins, you might be left trying to do some pattern recognition between what the inscription looks like and what the catalog tells you they are. Still, despite this difficulty, these are fantastic coins. Not only are they visually quite striking and very different from the more compact coins from other civilizations like the Romans, but there's also this thing. I personally believe this. If you collect ancient coins because you enjoy history, skipping at least one of these coins, considering how important the Sasanians were to Roman history, how they managed to beat the Romans in so many battles, for God's sake, they even managed to capture an emperor. Being a Roman coin collector and not owning a few coins issued by one of their main rivals, I think it's just a shame, especially with how abundant and affordable these coins are. There must have been some very sizable hoards discovered and released on the market in the last few decades, because these coins truly are very common. And as I mentioned, due to the fact it's a bit harder to identify these, and because they're not directly connected to some more famous civilizations like the Romans or the Greeks, this means this is a type of coin that you can get very reasonable prices. Even from major characters such as Ardashir himself, the founder, Narsi or Shapur, these can be had relatively easy and for not much money. maybe these three guys I mentioned, their coins are typically over the budget limits stipulated for this video, but for the lesser known kings, these are super affordable, so go give them a try. So we left the Sasanians, we keep going further east, and we reach India. I feel like ancient Indian numismatics has been receiving little by little more attention by Western collectors. And I also believe they deserve this attention, not only because most coins in bronze or silver are incredibly numerous and affordable, that's actually one of the less important of the reasons, but also because it's just of how many things, different things are out there. How the Indians found different ways of making coins. There are square coins, punched marked coins made on rectangular coins. Coins are shaped like bars. The style is all over the place. It's also incredibly creative. And of course, there's the fact India was always a massive melting pot, and the different cultures of the peoples that passed through this region, they left their mark on India's long numismatic history. The Greeks, for example, from the kingdom of Bactria in the far eastern reaches of Alexander the Great's conquests, they issued many coins in the area of India, and their numismatic tradition influenced Indian numismatics for centuries, even long after the last Indo-Greek kingdom fell. New political entities that took their place continued to issue coins heavily inspired by Greek style. Here's, for example, a cool example. I'm showing you a little drachma from King Nahapana. And as you can see, it is very Greek-esque in its design. It has a side-facing portrait of the king. There is an attempt at Greek legends at the borders, although by the time these pieces were made, no one used or spoke Greek anymore. It was just so customary to think that Greek was written on coins that they just attempted emulating Greek on their coins, even if it's all complete nonsense that is written here in this coin. And on the reverse, that's so cool, it's a mix of cultural influences. We have legends in local languages, Brahmi and Kharoshthi, so two languages used in the area where the coin circulated, while at the center we have a couple of symbols imported straight from Greek art. An arrow, symbolizing Apollo most likely, and the thunderbolt, obviously a reference to Zeus, so commonly shown on Bactrian coins. Now, once again, keep in mind when I'm saying ancient Indian coins here, I'm being incredibly broad. We're talking about 2,500 years of history and hundreds of different states that issued coins. So there is a lot of ground to cover in regards to types of coins, languages, kingdoms and empires that issued coins within this Indian universe. So it's worth, once again, stopping and thinking a little bit before you start to look into this field of coin collecting, because there's a lot to see. You might feel overwhelmed at first, but still, I don't want to discourage you. These coins represent a wonderful academic challenge for those who are curious for something beyond the Roman and Greek sphere. If you want, you can still follow the path of going with Greek influence in them, which gives this glimpse into the melting pot of nations that was India. That's what I personally focus on in my little Indian subset. And it's still a fairly inexpensive niche to collect. Hopefully no politicians decide to take more of our freedoms away and try imposing some sort of restriction on exports of these coins. And yeah, an entire world of numismatics that Western collectors should explore. And finally, heading back to Europe, I need to mention the hundreds of different types of coins issued during the Middle Ages by the different kingdoms that rose and fell during the medieval period. Dozens of kingdoms, city-states. There's once again a staggering number of coins out there. Of course, this is a very old and mature market. After all, numismatics was born in Europe, and there are the occasional rarities and some fairly expensive types all over the place, but there's also a deep pool of common, smaller denominations, particularly those sized at the penny, the most common denomination by far in medieval Europe, and these are widely available and usually very inexpensive. The markets for medieval coins are generally restricted to the country where the coins are from, so competition for such pieces is not particularly fierce at the moment, I would say. The reason for this abundance of coinage is because a large number of coins issued in medieval Europe were lower value bullion or relatively low grade silver at most. Of course, monetary systems were diverse and more complex than that, but this abundance of low denominations is a nice entrance point into medieval coinage for a low price tag. Visually, they can get as diverse as you might imagine, but a few patterns do show up. Some kind of cross often dominates the obverse or the reverse, a clear nod to Christian authority, and engravers found countless ways to vary that basic motif from mint to mint. Other visual elements like castles, lions, heraldic symbols, anything you typically think when referencing the medieval period was most likely put on coinage. And when you handle them for the first time after looking at Roman or Greek coins, you might be surprised on how extremely thin and light these coins are. That's because the blanks were mostly cut cold from metal sheets, rather than forged as thick rounds like in previous centuries, which gives them this distinctive feel compared to ancients. Once again, and I know I'm repeating myself, but this is a little bit of a broad video, this blanket term medieval coins is extremely vague. There's a lot out there, and it's a fairly long time frame here as well. We're talking about a good 1,000 years of numismatic history. The objective here is to let you know that this market exists, and how should you make sense of all of this variety. So personally, I think that's another niche you should begin with a certain objective in mind. You can organize, maybe get a set by a region or a ruler, or maybe go thematic and chase cross types, some type of iconography, some style of portraiture. It's really up to you, but I strongly recommend having a very clear target in mind. And well, here it is. We looked at a few interesting, good-looking options of ancient coins that sit comfortably in a starter budget. 3rd century Roman silver and radiates, late Roman bronzes across multiple reform systems, Roman provincials, Byzantines, and finally a long journey throughout Greek silver fractions and bronzes, Eastern types, Indians, and finally we wrapped it back into medieval Europe. Now, don't collect these because I said they are good value for money. Once again, remember it's your collection and you should collect what brings you joy. Alright, I hope you enjoyed this little overview. Leave a like and consider subscribing if you did. Happy collecting, and I'll see you soon. Let me give a special thank you to all of my amazing channel members and Patreons for their generous support. This channel would not be the same without your help. And if you would like to be part of this list, have early access to my videos when they are uploaded to YouTube, and a series of other perks, make sure to check out my Patreon page and my members tab on YouTube. Thank you very much.